Well, we've just about got everybody on the line. A couple of people had emailed said they were going to be joining us late. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. As I mentioned, this is kind of our business week and talking about sports business because so many of you are involved in the Mendoza School of Business. And so I want to have an opportunity to bring in a couple of guests to talk about the business part of sports. And there are all kinds of ways, sports marketing, sports business, you know, analysis now, and what you do with all the analytics. And there are so many ways now that you can get involved in sports business. And I wanted to bring in a friend of mine. Vince and I have worked together on a couple of properties here. We worked together at the Western and Southern Open tennis tournament. Brings in the top players, ATP and the women's WTA tournament. And also we work together at Cincinnati Bengals. And now Vince has his own company, 513 Sports and Entertainment, looking to really maximize the partnerships that sports entities can have with partners, with sponsors, and how really to activate that sponsorship and partnership. And as we talked about, you remember on Monday about you have a partnership, you have a sponsorship, but then you activate it. And how do you do that? And how much money do you spend for that activation? And so there are all kinds of different facets that we can talk about. But I wanted to bring in Vince Cicero. And as I said, we've worked together on tennis. We've worked together on football. Vince has worked in football. FC Cincinnati really launched FC Cincinnati into Major League Soccer. And also, as he mentioned, worked in the NBA, Detroit Pistons, did a little stint in Ironman. He has worked in all kinds of levels in sports and sports marketing and sports properties. And so, Vince, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this. And first thing that I want you to do, I wanted you to talk about first, let's go over your experience, how you got started in this business. Is this something that you wanted to do as soon as you got out of college, or how did you get into the sports business end of sports?
Yeah. First off, thank you for having me on. And certainly, as we talk today, feel free to ask any questions. Aside from Betsy and anything she would ask, the answer would be yes. It's, anything I can do to assist you, I'll be happy to do that. But when I was sitting in a similar spot, coming out of undergrad and interviewing, and really outside of sports, exploring a lot of opportunities, wasn't thrilled, wasn't excited about it. Started reaching out to every NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL team looking, and I was fortunate coming out of undergrad, I got a job with the Milwaukee Bucks. And at that time, growing up a big basketball person, I thought, well, I'm going to build my entire career in basketball and work in the NBA. So the idea, as Betsy was kind of rattling off, that I ended up working in NFL, MLS, Ironman, and worked for a couple NBA teams, was not something that I had all scripted. And what you'll see as you go along through your career path, certainly you have to be open to opportunities, open to change, open to new things that can help you grow. And I think I was fortunate in some of the decisions I made along the way. I've spent a vast majority of it here in Cincinnati, which is where I operate my consulting firm. Spent 13 years with the Cincinnati Bengals, went through the opening of a stadium there, spent 6.5 years with FC Cincinnati, went through the opening of their stadium, TQL Stadium, that opened in 2021, and then also spent 5 years running what was the Western Southern Open, what's now the Cincinnati Open, that has all the top ATP and WTA players. And I think the common thread for me was certainly partnerships all the way through. So working whether on the Pistons side, that's what brought me to the Bengals. That's what brought me to tennis, even though I was actually working with players and agents, international TV, domestic TV, working on scheduling. But the reason I was sitting in the tournament director and COO seat was because they wanted to grow their partnership portfolio. And then that was my role with Ironman, heading up their North American sales. And then that's what brought me to FC Cincinnati, to head up their partnerships and open TQL Stadium. So been fortunate along the way. I think working in a variety of different settings and properties also gives different perspectives. So sometimes as I'm answering a question, it might be based on one or multiple things that I saw, which has certainly diversified a little bit. So the other common thing has certainly been broadcasting too, because I wore those hats sometimes because no one else in the organization was going to take the lead. But with Bengals TV, we did preseason TV, produced it all in-house, did a weekly show that we put together. Same thing with MLS with FC Cincinnati before the new Apple deal took over and then they centralized the broadcast. So may be able to lend some, not as much as Betsy certainly, because she's got the most knowledge in our market on anything that's broadcast related. But certainly as we go through the discussion today, happy to answer any questions, and sometimes my answer might come from a variety of those different settings.
No, and that's exactly why I wanted to look at different aspects and different facets as you go from property to property and entity to entity. And making that leap from the NBA to the Bengals to different properties, you've been at properties that more or less people want to be part of. People
Mhm.
want to be part of the NBA. People want to be part of the NFL.
Yeah.
When you make those connections, is this something that you go out to a Cintas, or you go out to back then Cincinnati Bell? Do you go to them, or do they call you and say, hey, we want to be part of this? Oh, overall, what have you found, because you've been working in some pretty popular sports entities? Is it you going to them? They're coming to you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think sometimes there's a perception, especially probably heard it the most when I was working in the NFL, because that's by far the most popular in the United States of the different leagues that has the broadest appeal. I wish they were coming to us. The reality is it is heavy, heavy outreach. And I think it is a little bit easier depending on the property. When I was with the Bengals, it wasn't that they were coming to us, we were going out to them. But most would take a meeting, most would take a discussion because they wanted to explore. And the move I made after that, which was going into tennis, which is a very passionate audience that's there, but it's not as broad appeal as American football is. That was a little bit harder then. It wasn't, you were still doing the outreach, not as many meetings, and you really had to find out, okay, what business does this audience make the most sense for? And so the audience between NFL, which is broad appeal, pretty broad demos, to tennis just by comparison, where you've got very high demos, but it's a more narrow audience that is interested in it and they're very passionate about it. So I think there's probably a little more research, there's a little more data, there's a little more deeper dive that's needed with the properties that maybe are not as broad appeal as NFL or NBA. Ironman was another one when I worked there, extremely high demo, but a very more narrow audience. So to a certain degree, whether I was wearing a Bengals hat or I was wearing an Ironman hat or a tennis hat, I was doing similar things, but how I went about and who I went after were very, very different. It was really just understanding what's the data you have on the property? Who does this make sense for? Really, why would they align with you? Figure out the storytelling and why they should invest in you. So all of them were fascinating for me, but I wish it was the incoming calls. We didn't have too many of those. When we were at the Bengals, we kind of joked whoever was winning the Super Bowl that year, they were having the drive up window and people looking to spend some money with them. But for the most part, it's outreach and doing a lot of work. So that's certainly one of the challenges working in partnerships is you've got to realize you've got to do a lot of outreach in order to get your job done.
And when you do that outreach, I think a lot of people envision like you go in, you leave them a folder, you chat them up, and then you follow up with a phone call. But one thing that we have talked a lot this entire semester is really building your network and making those partnerships and making those relationships, maybe even before you make the ask.
Yeah.
Let's go over how you make those relationships even before you leave that folder. Who do you contact? How do you make those relationships? How you really build their trust before you make that ask?
Yeah, and I would say, and I've been in the industry now for a long time, it's gotten more and more challenging just because the communication channels that you can reach people, you're less likely to be able to try to get them on the phone as you were 15 or 20 years ago. There's a lot more channels, whether it's LinkedIn, it's texting, it's messaging in order to get the first meeting. But really, every first discussion, myself or anyone that's been a part of our partnership team, wherever I've been, is really the first role is to go in and listen. Because what you're trying to determine is what is their need? Because you can't walk in and say, here are three different options with aligning with the Bengals or FC Cincinnati because until you understand their business, so business analytics has certainly gotten to be a big piece of the industry right now. So a lot of time we're doing front end research to figure out, okay, here's our audience, here's what we are or what we aren't. And just as an example of that, the Bengals are a great broadcast property because watching the NFL is a deep passion, in the United States. That's not the case with Iron Man, for example. So it wasn't necessarily a great broadcast property other than the finals. So understanding what you are and you aren't, then determining who do we think we want to go after to find alignment with this. But the first meetings are all about understanding their needs, figuring out where they've got some pain points, and then going back and figuring out what solutions can we maybe give them. And the reality is sometimes it's none. It's what they are looking for is not something we can really deliver. And so it's important to recognize that. Usually there is some version of an option, and you're trying to come up with a solution that maybe hits within a budget price point. But the first steps are all about research. First steps are all about understanding their needs, their challenges. And just like person to person, some will share and some won't. So sometimes you walk in a meeting, they'll say, here's exactly what we're struggling with. Here's our needs. Do you have something that can help solve for it? And the next person you meet with might be playing poker and they're really not sharing a ton of information. That's kind of the reality of it all. But at the front end, you're trying to determine what needs they have, what solutions you can maybe provide, and then that second or third meeting is where you're going in then presenting some potential options. And I think from there you quickly determine is there a path forward? Is there something there that's going to resonate with the client? Or will this be a discussion that we gathered a lot of information, we're not a good solution, or they don't feel we're a good solution, and then you're moving on to the next one, or you're maybe cycling back to them a year or 2 years later.
You talked about broadcast entities, and I mean that's where the money is, and we keep seeing every year, those broadcast rights exponentially
Yeah,
get higher and higher and more expensive and more expensive. You talked about the MLS deal with Apple TV.
yeah.
When MLS makes that deal, do they come to the individual franchises and say, "Hey, we're going to go with Apple TV. What do you guys think?" Do you get any kind of a say in it, or do they say, "We're getting a gazillion dollars from Apple TV to do this, and we're all going to get a share of it"? Or do you have any kind of a say in what that is? Because beforehand, just to give the students some background, like there would be a local station that would televise the FC Cincinnati games, and that was a great way to build up your fandom. If you could sit at home and watch the game and watch the excitement, and then you say, "Hey, I want to go to that. That looks like fun." But
Yeah.
Apple TV, there's a couple of extra steps that you have to take to make sure that you watch that game. So, what is the process like, especially with the MLS?
Yeah, honestly, I think the Apple and MLS will be a case study for years for people to take a look at from a broadcast because it's kind of fascinating. You're exactly right. I mean, if you step back, and again, I reference NFL broad appeal just because it's such the behemoth in the United States. Soccer in Europe is monstrous. Soccer in the US is going through growth, and this is obviously a big year 26 with FIFA World Cup being in the country, so there's a unique challenge. But we went from, as we entered MLS, which was for FC Cincinnati, 2019 was the first year of MLS, and we were the broadcasts were all on local stations, and I viewed it, many of us viewed it as we are trying to create sampling to get audiences to see what this is. And you could easily turn on the TV free of charge and be able to see the matches. With the Apple relationship, what happened initially, and they changed it for the season, but they put it in place, but they put it behind a paywall, which was really counter to the idea of you're trying to grow your audience because then you weren't going to stumble upon a broadcast and sample, and it really became a great in-stadium, in-venue sport, but broadcast was really struggling. And I think over a few years they saw that, the owners saw that the executives all saw that, and this year they flipped it where on basic Apple, you can now get the games, which still requires a step, but not as big a step, and there's a broader audience that has it. To answer your original question, on the front end, they had some representatives from a handful of teams who were a part of that, but it was not a broad feedback because as the Apple deal came through and they were going through broadcasts. We could have ended up on Netflix. We could have stayed on over-the-air TV. We could have ended up on Amazon. There could have been a deal with ESPN. There could have been a deal with Fox, FS1, whoever it may be. And Apple was the route that was selected. And I think our universally across the marketing sponsorship executives, our feeling was, this is going to be a challenge because of the accessibility. And you're always going to balance accessibility, visibility, and what the financials are, what that means for the league or what that means for the team. I don't think anyone's grown it any better than, and they've got the demand to command the huge sums, but the NFL has done such a great job of carving out the calendar and figuring out and having multiple broadcast partners so that you've got leverage at all times. And, there's the ongoing discussion of they want to eventually move the schedule to 18 regular season games and what that will fuel by adding additional broadcast package and looking at Wednesdays before Thanksgiving broadcasts as another great broadcast window. They are fascinating to watch, but just as fascinating is the Apple and MLS and some of those steps. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of that term, what happens to the growth of soccer in the United States, especially this year, 26. This is as good as you get. FIFA World Cup in the United States in normal, call it normal broadcast times for people that live, whether you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, to be exposed to the sport and what kind of growth that you see by the end of it. So if you're a soccer fan, I'm sure you'll be heavily vested in it, throughout the summer. If you're just a sports business fan, it'll be fascinating to watch what that means and then related what that maybe means for MLS and some of the growth and where they go as broadcast. So I think broadcasts, and I'm sure you've talked about it. The great thing about sports and broadcast is it's such a fragmented TV audience that's out there. And there's nothing like live sports where you don't know the outcome that pulls in people. And that's why viewership on the sports side does so well as opposed to some of the other prepackaged programming and all the options that are there. So again, whether you're a basketball fan, baseball, soccer, whatever it may be, live sports is just that will continue to be such a premium, everywhere as opposed to some of the prepackaged options that are out there.
Right. Right. And I always say it's the one thing that's DVR proof. You can't tape it and then, 2 days later talk to your buddies about it because they've already gone on to the next event. If you want to
Yeah.
be relevant, you got to watch it live. And that's the one thing about it. And,
Yeah.
you talked about the broadcast entities, and we are seeing now that some of the franchises are pulling back their rights, and they own the rights and they're putting it up on antenna TV. They're just going back to, where we were 30 years ago. Instead of having it
Yeah.
on cable because so many people are cutting cable, they're putting it back up on the antenna. I mean, the Reds are doing that. We've got I think a 20 game package at Fox 19 that we're showing the Reds game. So, what
Yeah.
everything old is new again, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. There's so many factors as you look at broadcasts, and dollars are always, and no one can kid you, dollars are always going to be a big piece of the puzzle, but it also has to do with whatever your sports property is, where are you in your audience growth, a sport like soccer, which is trying to grow at a broad level and have that, but also what your in-venue audience is. And use FC Cincinnati as an example. Like they need to grow the broader soccer audience, within the market, within the region, but generally do really well in venue. So it's a 25,000 seat venue, most times is sold out. So it isn't that, but it's everything else that you're trying to go. And, just on the partnership side, to have the broad appeal so people are not only attending, but they're also watching and they're buying merchandise. And if you have a point of sale in Kroger, that you've got some activation that's there that's going to drive business, you're needing to grow the sport. But all those factors on the broadcast front, what this means for your audience, what it means for growth, always what it means financially, is going to be a piece of it.
All right, so let us talk about. We talked about all the great things that you can do with sports and sports partnerships. Let's talk about kind of the challenges. Top of mind in the news right now, Tiger Woods.
Yeah,
We have seen this movie before a
yeah.
couple of times. Tiger Woods, and we have talked briefly in class about how huge of a sports figure he was until he wasn't.
Mhm.
Ironically, car crash in front of his house, and it was an ugly fall from grace. He could have commanded just about any number from a whole lot of sponsors at that particular time, and he lost sponsors. Well, a few years ago, had another car crash, came back from that. He became warm and fuzzy story. He came back from all these controversies, the injuries, won the Masters when nobody expected to. So overall, it was a great story. He was making inroads that, oh, maybe I'll show up at the Masters this year. And then, of course, ironically, another car crash.
Mhm.
Um, if you are a Nike, which was so joined at the hip with Tiger for years, a Buick, rattle off his sponsors. How do you face that, especially now? This is like the third time that we've gone through this with Tiger.
Yeah.
For you who advises potential sponsors, I mean, how do you face it? What do you do? What kind of tough conversations do you have, maybe on both sides, on both ends, about continuing sponsorships, continuing partnerships? How do you work that? Because it's a slippery slope because Tiger Woods is still going to be Tiger Woods. However, this comes out, he's still going to be somebody that everybody watches. But then you have the yes, but do I want my brand connected with that? So kind of go through that scenario and how you advise sponsors to, do you stay with them? Do you don't? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge risk reward discussion. And what's the challenge will be at the front end, and just think about the individual sports, golf and tennis and some of those where you're aligning or a high profile member that's on a team sport. The challenge is at the very front end as someone is maybe emerging on the sport when you have the risk reward discussion to understand what is that level. Like Tiger at this point, or even Tiger 5 years ago, you had more data to show here is the downside. And I'll use a flip example, probably one of the greatest and nicest athletes I've ever interacted with was Roger Federer. Roger, as he came onto the scene, might not have fully been known, but as quickly people realized this is an extremely safe bet, not only on who he was as a person, what he represented, but his on-court success as it was building. So I think as someone moves along through their career, it's a little bit easier to have the analysis because you have more data. The challenge is at the front end, someone who is emerging to truly understand what is the downside. And I've had discussions with brands who really want no part of individuals just for that reason. Like it's just not worth us investing too much in an individual. And they may lean towards a team sport. They still want to be in sports, but a team sport, but not align with an individual. But also you've got the reward side of it, and especially for the endemic brands, Nike's a really good example. I mean, when you look at what Nike drove through Tiger and through Roger, the business that they drove because of the success of the individual on the course or on the court in those examples is tremendous. But you'll have other brands. I'll use Mercedes-Benz because they've had a long-standing relationship with Roger. Great spokesperson, consistent with their brands, and just a great fit. Does he drive as many sales as he did for Nike? Well, no, because it's not authentically something you're going to put on your feet and go play tennis or in Tigers with golf, but it's that constant risk and reward balance that you have to have. And some brands are comfortable with that because they see the upside, and some brands want zero part, or maybe they were burned at some point in the past and they will stay away from it, moving forward, or some are fine until something happens and then they won't want any part. But that's anytime you align with an individual, even if they're a team representative and Kevin Durant, and you pick whatever it might be, like you're gonna get the upside and potential downside for it. And some brands' comfort level is just not there for it, and some are all about the upside.
Yeah, good point there. I'll open it up to some questions. Anybody want to jump in and have a question? Please feel free. Again, I can't see everybody all at once, so if you've got a question, jump in. Anybody got a question? I'll
I
follow
have
up.
a
Oh,
question.
okay. Go ahead.
Wait.
Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you so much for talking with us today. I like study business analytics on top of doing film and sports. And I had noticed you had mentioned like analytics is the first thing you look at. I was curious, what are some key um like numbers or like I guess kind of like areas you look at, whether that's audience size or household income?
Yeah, now I'll say analytics is business analytics, and it goes by different titles in some organizations. It's business intelligence, whatever it might be. That's been a fascinating area. I would say that and pure marketing are like the two bigger growth areas in team sport front offices. It wasn't long ago when we had we opened TQL Stadium, so 2021, we had one person who was sort of wearing an analytics hat that was a part of it, but it wasn't a 100% role. Now there's six people who do that. So it is a fascinating one because, the partners in the end are looking for the most data they can for making a decision. So it helps on that storytelling, but also for everything that's done on the ticket sales side and merchandise side and things such as that. But as to the information, I think there's a, a variety of different sources. One is what you have access to. And sometimes that is league-wide shared data that you will have access to and you will be able to utilize for your property. Some of it is data that is purchased by the teams individually, so they subscribe to information that they utilize, and whether it's broader like Sponsor United, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or YouGov or Scarborough. There's a variety of different sources. And then more and more teams are just really gathering their own. So as simple as, and I'll use FC Cincinnati, there's a post-match survey that goes out to a population of the audience that bought tickets for the game every single match. And that data is gathered then match after match after match and gathered up over the course of it. Some of it is the gathering, some of it is the access, but what I've always viewed as the most important is what you do with it. And I think that's the greatest value of someone who's in analytics. It's great to have this information. What does this mean for us and how do we use it is probably the most critical aspect. So if you're in that area of the business or you're looking to get in the area of the business, I don't see it going the other way. I only see growth for it, just because everyone is trying to make more informed decisions, whether it is the organization for the things they are doing and what they're not doing, but also for the partners and other business constituents that you need to deliver information for. There's so much scrutiny on CMOs and marketing decision makers now. Why are you investing a 500,000 or $1 million or $3 million in a property? How are we going to get a return? The more information that can be shared from the team, from the property to them, in addition to what they gather up themselves, is only going to increase the chance of that investment. And that's why I don't see it going a different direction other than only growing. But it's not just the gathering. I think the secret sauce and all that is what do you do with the information and how do you decipher it in some actionable way for the organization, whether that's in partnerships, how we package up our ticketing, how we go to market, what are the things we have offered on the merchandise side, what are some of the customer service aspects that we need to address or lean into a little bit more. So it's a fascinating area of all the areas, I think.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Any other questions? Anybody want to jump in?
Um, you mentioned kind of opening like new stadiums and arenas. I was just kind of wondering if you could touch on the timeline of like the timeline of doing that.
Yeah, great question. I would tell you of all the different things I've done, the venue opening, because I've opened a basketball arena, a football stadium, a soccer stadium, and went through a major expansion at the tennis center. Mine was only about 35 million. Last year they did about 200 million, so it's a smaller one. But the four different venues, and I'm now working on a music venue that's opening next year here in Cincinnati, the Farmer Music Center, has been fascinating work. But generally, you're about 2 years out as you are going through the design phase and starting to put it in place. And I'll put that in the context of my role at FC Cincinnati. So I was there for the start of the 2019 MLS season. And almost the majority of my time was focused on our new stadium, even though we were playing at a college football stadium, the University of Cincinnati football stadium. We were playing soccer there for 2 more years. My focus was on the new TQL stadium that was going to open in 2021. So it's about a 2 year cycle of going through, working with the architects, designing what it is, going through the construction phase, and then the opening. Each venue is going to be a little bit different. So I don't want to compare a $2 billion NFL stadium with a $400 million soccer stadium and all the different things that might be in between, but generally about 2 years out. And on the partnership side, just on that piece, we pretty much started conversations as soon as we had general renderings, not detailed renderings, but general renderings of what the building was going to be. We started the conversation with partners at that time. And once it moved along, and so a year and a half out, we're starting these conversations. And then a year out, the architect has moved a little bit further down the road, and we've got more detailed information on what it is we're offering. Then we're into deep discussions at that point because on the partnership side, at least, you always have to keep in mind the budget cycle. So most businesses operate on a calendar for their fiscal. So it starts on January 1, ends December 31st. They are usually by October of the prior year deep into where they are looking to spend money for the next year. So we had to be ahead of that. Our building was opening in March of 21. So in the fall of 20, we were really needing to line up most of our big partners at that point because we needed to be in their budget cycle. Um, a company might be able to spend $100,000 without a lot of lead time, but a 500,000, million plus is a significant investment for any business. And that just needs to be within their normal course of their budget cycle. So we were always conscious of that, whether it was on the ticketing side for people buying suites or investing in premium seating, or on the partnership side where we were going to look for 3, 4, 5 year deals that were going to be a part of the new building. But at a broad level, it's about two years, and a detailed level, starting about 18 months out to 12 months out, is a key window.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And TQL Stadium is just one of these stadiums that it's soccer sized. It's not too big. You play soccer in most markets. You play soccer in a football stadium, and even though you may have 20, 30,000 people, it looks small because the football stadium is so big. But it's soccer size, 25,000, and I swear to you, you walk into TQL Stadium and you don't think that you're in Cincinnati. You think you are at a Euro venue. It's just so well cared for, well lit. It is just exactly what FC Cincinnati needed at that particular time. They really needed to bring that kind of Euro flavor into the MLS market, and so it's a great stadium. And as you mentioned, we still do the Thanksgiving Day race there in front of TQL Stadium. So it's
Yeah.
just a great venue, along with the concerts. I see you've got your Kenny Chesney back there. They had the Who concert there. What was the one that was rained out last
Zach
year?
Brown.
Yeah,
Zach
Zach
Brown.
Brown. Yeah, they
Yeah.
couldn't do, but they use it for concerts and different things like that too, as well. So,
Yeah. But
um,
behind me, I have two of my favorite things in sports. I mentioned Roger Federer, and I'll say one of the
mhm,
greatest things I got is typically after our tournament, I went to the US Open because we had tennis meetings that were there. So I was in New York, come back from New York, and I get this letter in the mail, and it's from a hotel in New York. And I'm thinking, oh, it must have been someone I met. They sent some follow-up. It's a thank you note from Roger Federer
mm,
thanking me and the team for taking care of him and his family. So I've got that as a keepsake. And then the Kenny Chesney concert, which was one of the projects I worked on. His team, I enjoy quality people, and Kenny and his whole team were so wonderful to work with, so appreciative
mhm,
of everything. We had a great experience. It was a fun night for everyone who attended the concert, and it was a great. So I have a couple keepsakes of kind of those meaningful things. I've got plenty of things that maybe didn't didn't go well and other things, but I won't put those on my wall behind me. So
Well, those are two pretty important things.
yeah,
And I do have to say, I have this goes under other duties as assigned. I have seen Vince picking up bags and carrying bags for the tennis players. I have seen him rushing towels into the locker room for the tennis players. I mean, I have seen him do any job that is needed at that particular time. And I think that that's a good lesson for everybody. There is no job too big or no job too small. If the players don't have towels in the locker room, guess what? Vince is there with a stack of towels and he's going to go in.
yeah.
And that I think helped elevate the Western and Southern Open in the eyes of the tennis players because and it's been said and Vince mentioned it's expanded since then, but it's been said that if you can't make it to the U.S. Open, Mary Carrillo famously said it, if you can't make it to the U.S. Open, come to Cincinnati and see tennis because whoever has been in charge there has helped elevate it to really, truly world-class status. And Vince, you were right in the middle of it, that, you made it not only fan friendly, but also player friendly. So they wanted to come to Cincinnati.
Well, it's nice of you to say, and hopefully whatever your work setting is, like just those little things, you care enough, you're passionate and enjoy it enough that you'll do the really small things. And what you also realize is if you're doing that at the beginning as you elevate, to different levels in your career path, other people are watching you. So if they see
Mm.
you doing it, there was a colleague of mine at the Bengals. We used to walk around, and if we were walking through and there was trash, we would pick it up and throw it in the trash receptacle. And then you'd start to notice other people who would see that and they're like they viewed it as anything you do to make it a little bit nicer. But hopefully you care enough with whatever you decide your career path's going to be. Hopefully that's in sports. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But whatever it is, that you care enough just to do the little things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Any other questions anybody has? If they want to jump in. Anybody? You mentioned working on the new
Yeah.
Farmer Music Center that's going
Yep.
on. Just to give everybody a little historical background on this. Cincinnati has had the Riverbend Music Center. Riverbend's been around 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an amphitheater, and it's kind of like almost every large market has this kind of outdoor amphitheater. There's a smaller indoor theater there as well, but it's been there for 40 years and it's beginning to show its age. So this is all connected with a large, again, historical area, Coney Island, which was it had a huge pool. It was like an amusement park. And lore has it that Walt Disney came to Coney Island to see how he wanted to do Disneyland. I don't know if it's true or not, but it makes a good story. So anyway, Coney Island was sold, and this new Farmer Music Center will be there on that footprint, which is right on the interstate. It's easy to get to. Everybody knows how to get to it. So it's been a couple of years in the making to get this thing rolling, but you mentioned that you're working on that. So what does
Yeah.
that entail? What are you doing? Because this is a brand new facility. Again, you're opening another new facility. So
Yeah.
how do you go in? You educate people on what's there, who's going to come, what's available, how can you guys get involved? And so how do you go about, again, talking to people about you want to be part of this on the ground floor?
Yeah, and it's going to be a fabulous facility. I think all of these venues, there's a lot of full stadiums that were built in the late 90s, early 2000s that are soon coming up to their shelf life. And here in Cincinnati, Paycor Stadium's about to go through, hundreds of millions of dollars renovation that's a part of it. Other venues are going to build new ones. Amphitheaters, there haven't been a lot of new ones in recent time, but that cycle's about to start. And the biggest change is going to be the volume of premium that the marketplace now looks for, whether it's a music venue, it's a sports venue, whatever it might be. This will be dramatically different than the existing ones. It'll have four premium clubs, some really nice space, but it's also going to have very inexpensive tickets that will be on a synthetic lawn, with a roof line that's over it. And the current venue will stay up because what it's going to set up, and there's a smaller one that's next to it too, called the PNC Pavilion, is festival music, and maybe some people have attended some where you go and there's multiple stages going on at one time. It provides for that opportunity. So this new one is about the same capacity, 20,000 people, as the older existing one. So they'll have two 20,000 seat plus a smaller one to be able to do festival type concerts. But the new venue will be the dominant venue, and the biggest difference will be twofold. One will be the premium space that consumers can take advantage, that drives a lot more dollars, as a part of a typical concert night. And it's also a newly built building that is customized for the artists and making it easy. And I'll reference back to Kenny Chesney just real quickly. One of the things I realized, we recruited, in essence, Kenny to come play at TQL Stadium. And one of the things I quickly saw was that his operations team, you needed to satisfy them because they could quickly kibosh going there if they didn't feel it was an easy venue to roll in and roll out of. The new venue, the Farmer Music Center, is all about making it easy for the bands who usually are on multiple market tours during the course of the summer, that whether, let's say, they came in from Kansas City, they can quickly roll in, set up, and then roll out and head on to Nashville or wherever they are next. That it's a convenient building for the artists, and then it's a building that's, tailored towards the premium experience, which is what a lot of consumers are looking for. So it'll be exciting. It'll open next summer. You invest dollars like this, and then you're, gonna get 20, 30, 40 years of shelf life, out of it.
Now that's a good point. Those amphitheaters really were built about the same time. Deer Creek over in Indianapolis, and any of the other ones. They're almost the exact same footprint, and they're almost the exact same age. So yeah, you're right. It's about time for them to be re-upped. So
Yeah.
as I always do with our guests, I like to close out by having you give us some words of wisdom and just give some advice to the students about, okay, if this is what you want to do, how do you build that network? What do you do before you graduate to get some experience? Just some of your, words of wisdom, some advice that you might give to the students.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. You certainly have a great person to lean into here with Betsy. But what I would certainly encourage, and I'm not quite sure who may be right on the cusp of graduating or who might have a little bit of time, but just like Betsy, asked for some time for me to participate today, I would take advantage of the areas that you might be interested in. I know we had one person reference on, analytics, and maybe it's finance, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's partnership sales, maybe it's broadcasting, whatever it might be. I would do some outreach and try to get 15-minute conversations with as many people as you can to get perspective. Because I think the more you find out, hopefully you got a couple nuggets of something I might have said today, and maybe it triggered towards something you want to do, or maybe, reinforce something you didn't want to do as a part of it. I think the more people you can have conversations with, and I would tell you, for those that are in the industry, like I'm doing this really twofold today because Betsy asked me, and also an opportunity to just share some information with students. You will have a lot of people that will be open to it. So be it LinkedIn, or if you can secure their email, for those that you might be targeting, whether it's the team, it's the property, it's the job role, whatever it might be, and ask for 15-minute conversations. I would do that. You're not going to get everybody to say yes, but you're going to be able to get enough people who you'll be able to get additional insights for. I think that would be invaluable. and for the amount of time it will take, it's a wise investment. And certainly, for what you're doing right now, again, not sure who is on the cusp of graduation. Sports is generally one that does put a premium on some previous experience. So whether you're a student athlete and you're talking about, the work ethic, the dedication, the grind of the schedule and how efficient you can be, or if you're in a position to take on different internship type roles. And Betsy, we were talking at the very front end, Betsy's involved with the Flying Pig Marathon, which events that just occur one time and over a weekend or during a defined time period can be tremendous volunteer opportunities. So when you think about internships or experiences, don't just think about the summer time frame or long durations. Look at whether it's in your home market that you may be going back to, or opportunities that may be there, that you can look at those one-off sporting related events to be able to volunteer or do mini internships. The Cincinnati Open is one of the best internships that exists in sports because of the amount of exposure and decision making that you have to do in those roles. But I would look at those opportunities. The more you can add up, so the more people you can talk to, the more experiences you can get. One, it looks good on a resume, which is great. But two, just for yourself, as you're trying to figure out what is it you want to do or not do, those are really, really valuable. And sometimes finding out what you don't want to do is just as valuable as what you do want to do, because then you're not burning time on that. And likewise, the one thing I would also point out is just geography, is you're targeting opportunities. Some people are open to working anywhere after they graduate, wide open, whether it's West Coast, it's in New York, Southeast, wherever it might be. And other people, you're not. You really want to be in the Midwest or wherever home may be. I would have that conversation with yourself so that when you are putting forth all the efforts towards what you're working towards, if you are wide open or you're not wide open, just acknowledge that at the start, and that will narrow your focus or maybe broaden your focus. I think there's too many people who maybe go down paths and they're trying to do everything, and in the end they realize, oh, this is actually what I really want to do. I would just try to understand your own personal geography of what you want from a career perspective, because I think that's valuable and lets you focus in a little bit more on what you really want to go after.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's important to find out before you graduate what you don't want to do, and if you get into an internship and it's not what you want to do, fine. It's not the end of the world. It's no better to find it out now than find it out later. So,
Yeah.
Vince, great advice. Really informative discussion. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. For the class, thank you. Enjoy the Easter break. Enjoy Dingus Day. Remember, we're not meeting next Monday because it's Dingus Day. Yes, I will continue to sell Dingus Day. And then next Wednesday, we will have Mike Golick Jr. Zoom in and he'll talk about podcasting. Do they have Dingus Day in Milwaukee, Vince?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about.
All right, it's basically because South Bend has a very Polish history,
Oh,
and
okay.
there's still a lot of a lot of Polish families who are here. And Dingus Day is a very Polish celebration, and it's basically celebrating the day after Easter, and you drink beer and eat hard-boiled eggs. So think about that for a while.
Sounds fascinating. Enjoy Dingus Day, everybody.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. So, Vince, thank you again. I appreciate it. Is it
Yeah.
okay if I put your LinkedIn up there if anybody wants to follow up?
Yeah, please do.
I will do
Happy
that.
to help out in any way. Hopefully you got a couple things out of this, but if there's any follow-ups I can be of assistance, just let me know.
I will do that. Thanks again, Vince.
All
Take
right.
care.
Take care.
Take care,
See ya.
class. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.